If you're a Raiders fan right now, you can probably feel it too. Something big is happening around this team. And honestly, it feels like the front office just decided overnight that standing still is no longer an option. Because in the span of what felt like just a few hours, we saw two moves that say a lot about where this franchise is heading. One of them is about building the foundation of this roster from the ground up. The kind of move that could completely change how this team looks on Sundays. And the other? That one is about closing a chapter, and possibly clearing the path for the future of the Raiders. And if you watched this team last season like I did, you know exactly why these decisions matter so much. A 3-win season hurts. Watching the silver and black struggle week after week hurts even more. But what we're seeing right now might be the beginning of the reset this team desperately needed. And trust me, some of the decisions they made are going to get fans talking. Before we break all of that down, real quick, if you're a real Raiders fan and you want daily updates about everything happening with this team, do me a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and help us reach our first goal of 5,000 subscribers here on Raiders Nation Update. My name's Victor, and if you bleed silver and black like I do, you're definitely in the right place. Alright, so let's start with the first big storyline. Honestly, this one tells you exactly how aggressive the Raiders decided to be the moment free agency opened. Las Vegas was easily the busiest team on day one of the NFL legal tampering period. No hesitation, no slow approach. They went all in and signed 6 different players in a single day, committing a total of $240.5 million. And look, after a 3-14 season, that kind of urgency actually makes sense. This team finished with the worst record in the entire league and ended up with the #1 overall pick in the draft. And while the expectation right now is that the Raiders are going to draft Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza as the future of the franchise, the front office clearly understands something important. You can't throw a rookie quarterback into a broken roster and expect miracles. So the mission right now is simple: raise the floor of the entire team. And the biggest move they made to start that process was bringing in center Tyler Linderbaum. This was the crown jewel of their free agency class. The Raiders signed him to a 3-year deal worth $81 million, which officially made him the highest paid interior offensive lineman in NFL history. And honestly, this might end up being one of the smartest moves they made. Linderbaum is only 25 years old and already built an incredible resume with the Baltimore Ravens. He made the Pro Bowl every single season from 2023 through 2025. Since entering the league in 2022 as the 25th overall pick, he's ranked second among all centers in pass block win rate. And he's not just protecting the quarterback either. He ranked 7th in run block win rate as well. So when you think about what this Raiders offensive line looked like last season, bringing in someone like Linderbaum immediately gives the entire unit a new anchor in the middle. If this team really is drafting Mendoza, having elite protection up front is absolutely critical. But the Raiders didn't stop there. They also completely reshaped the linebacker group. First came Nakobe Dean, who signed a 3-year contract worth $36 million. Dean is also just 25 years old, but his career path has been a little different. He was drafted in the 3rd round by the Philadelphia Eagles back in 2022, and he didn't really become a full-time starter until the 2023 season. Unfortunately, that year ended early because of a Lisfranc injury after just 5 games. But then came the 2024 season, and that's when he really broke out. Dean finished that season with 128 combined tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. He was a huge part of the Eagles' defense during their Super Bowl 59 championship run. But again, injuries followed him. During the Eagles' wildcard game against the Green Bay Packers, Dean suffered a torn patellar tendon. That's a scary injury for any linebacker. The good news is he managed to return by week 6 of the 2025 season, and when he came back, he still produced. He finished that year with 55 tackles, 4 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. So the big question for Raiders fans now is simple. Are we getting the 2024 version of Nakobe Dean, or will injuries continue to follow him? The Raiders are clearly betting on the upside. And what makes this move even more interesting is the fact that they paired Dean with one of his old college teammates. The Raiders also signed linebacker Key Walker to a 3-year deal worth $40.5 million. Walker comes over from the Green Bay Packers, and one thing you can say about him is that he stays on the field. In his career so far, he has played 58 out of a possible 68 games. That's durability. But more importantly, he's consistently productive. Over his 4 seasons in Green Bay, he averaged about 117 combined tackles per year. And athletically, Walker is exactly the kind of player you want in a 3-4 defense. When you compare that to what the Raiders were dealing with last season with Devin White and Elandon Roberts, it's pretty clear the team needed a serious upgrade at linebacker. Now Dean and Walker, two former Georgia Bulldogs teammates, get to reunite in Las Vegas. Then we get to a move that came after one of the most shocking decisions this franchise made recently. The Raiders traded Max Crosby to the Baltimore Ravens for 2 first-round picks. Losing Crosby leaves a massive hole in the pass rush, and that's where Kwity Paye comes in. The Raiders signed Paye to a 3-year deal worth $48 million. He spent the first 5 seasons of his career with the Indianapolis Colts, where he recorded 30.5 sacks. Now let's be real here. Replacing Crosby's production is nearly impossible. That's not something you just patch overnight. But Paye is still only 27 years old, and there's a belief that there might still be some untapped potential in his game. That said, some analysts did question the move because other young edge rushers like Odef Owe and Boy Mafe were also available, so time will tell if the Raiders picked the right guy. Offensively, the Raiders also added a wide receiver to help whoever ends up under center next season. They signed Minnesota Vikings receiver Jalen Nailor to a 3-year deal worth $35 million. And this one honestly comes with some question marks. Nailor was never the primary option in Minnesota. He was behind Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in the passing attack. Over his 4 seasons with the Vikings, he totaled 1,066 receiving yards and 11 touchdowns on 69 receptions. He has never had a season with more than 450 receiving yards. One thing he does bring, though, is strong run blocking from the wide receiver position, which can definitely help in certain offensive schemes. But if we're being honest as Raiders fans, he probably can't be the only receiver this team adds. The current receiving group, Trey Tucker, Jack Beck, and Deontay Thornton, is still pretty thin. And finally, the Raiders made a change on special teams by signing kicker Matt Gay. Gay spent time with the Washington Commanders and later the San Francisco 49ers last season. The Commanders released him after he went 13 for 19 on field goal attempts before the 49ers signed him. He finished the 2025 season making all of his extra points and 4 field goals with San Francisco, but overall he converted just 73.9% of his kicks that year. And here's why some fans might not love this move. The Raiders let go of Daniel Carlson to bring him in. Carlson converted 81.5% of his kicks last season, which is actually a higher percentage than Gay. So depending on how you look at it, the Raiders may have actually downgraded at kicker. But when you zoom out and look at everything together, one thing becomes obvious. The Raiders didn't sit back and wait this offseason. They attacked free agency with real urgency, added youth at multiple positions, and clearly started building the kind of roster that could support a rookie quarterback if they draft Fernando Mendoza. But while all these new players were arriving in Las Vegas, something else was happening behind the scenes. Because at the exact same time the Raiders were rebuilding parts of this roster, they were also preparing to move on from the quarterback who started last season. And the way that situation just unfolded might actually say even more about the direction of this franchise. Alright, so now we need to talk about the other major move the Raiders made. This one officially closes the book on last season's starting quarterback. The Raiders have traded Gino Smith back to the team where his NFL career originally began, the New York Jets. The deal itself is pretty straightforward, but there are a few important details that matter. The Jets agreed to send the Raiders a 6th-round pick in this year's draft, pick number 208 overall. In return, Las Vegas sends Gino Smith to New York, along with a 7th-round pick, number 228. Now, at first glance, that might not look like a huge trade, but the context behind it explains why this move happened. The Raiders were actually planning to release Gino Smith if they couldn't find a trade partner. So instead of getting nothing in return, the front office managed to turn the situation into at least a small asset in the draft. To make the deal work, the Raiders agreed to pay most of Smith's remaining salary. Gino also agreed to restructure his contract to help facilitate the trade. Because of that, the Jets will only pay him $3.3 million this season. And from the Raiders' side, the trade creates about $2 million in additional cap space. On top of that, the $1.3 million Smith would have earned on a league minimum contract if he had been released now stays in the team's cap for this season instead of being pushed to 2027. So financially, the Raiders clean things up a little bit. But the bigger story here is what this move represents. Gino Smith's time with the Raiders was short and unfortunately pretty rough. The team traded a 3rd-round pick to acquire him last March and immediately named him the starting quarterback. The hope was that he could stabilize the offense and help the team compete. Instead, the season completely fell apart. Smith finished the year with 3,025 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions. The Raiders ended the season 3-14, which ultimately gave them the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming draft. And that number 1 pick is exactly why this trade matters so much. Because right now, everything points to the Raiders selecting Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza as the future of the franchise. Moving Gino Smith out of the building basically clears the runway for that plan. The team is starting fresh at quarterback, building the roster around that future, and removing any confusion about who the long-term leader of the offense is supposed to be. But the Raiders didn't just focus on outside moves this week. They also made sure to keep a couple of their own players from leaving. The team placed restricted free agent tenders on defensive lineman Thomas Booker IV and offensive lineman Jordan Meredith. Let's start with Meredith. He received what's called a standard tender, which gives him a guaranteed one-year contract worth $3.52 million. Other teams can still try to sign him by offering an offer sheet, but the Raiders would have the right to match it and keep him. So essentially, Las Vegas keeps control over his situation. Then there's Thomas Booker IV, who actually had a breakout season on the defensive line last year. The Raiders gave him what's called an original round tender. That means if another team tries to sign him away, they would have to give up a fifth-round draft pick to the Raiders. If no team does that, Booker will remain with Las Vegas and earn $3.674 million this season. So while the Raiders were aggressively bringing in outside talent, they also made sure to keep some of their own depth pieces in place. And when you step back and look at everything that happened, the free agent signings, the roster reshaping, and the quarterback move, it's pretty clear the Raiders are fully committing to a new direction. But here's the real question Raiders fans should be asking right now. Are these moves enough to truly change the trajectory of this franchise? Let's wrap this whole thing up. When you put these two stories together, they tell you everything about where the Raiders are right now as a franchise. This team isn't just making random moves. There's clearly a reset happening in Las Vegas. On one side, the front office went out and spent big in free agency. 6 new players and over $240 million committed in a single day. They reinforced the offensive line with Tyler Linderbaum, rebuilt the linebacker unit with Nakobe Dean and Key Walker, added pass rush help with Kwity Paye, brought in another receiver in Jalen Naylor, and even made a controversial change at kicker with Matt Gay. That's a team trying to raise the overall level of the roster as quickly as possible. But on the other side, the Gino Smith trade makes it crystal clear that the Raiders are officially turning the page at quarterback. Moving Gino, even for a small return, shows that the organization is fully preparing for what comes next. And all signs point to that next chapter being Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza. So what we're watching right now is the early stage of a rebuild, but not the slow kind. This front office is trying to build the structure of the team first, so when the new quarterback arrives, he's not walking into the same mess we saw last season. And honestly, as a Raiders fan, that's something we haven't always seen from this franchise. For years, it felt like the team kept trying shortcuts. Fix one problem and ignore 3 others while hoping it somehow works out. But this offseason feels different. They're rebuilding the offensive line. They're upgrading the defense. They're managing the salary cap. They're clearing the quarterback situation. And if they actually land the right quarterback in the draft, this entire roster could look completely different by the time next season starts. Now, that doesn't mean everything is perfect. There are still questions at wide receiver. The pass rush without Max Crosby is going to look very different. And some of these signings, especially Matt Gay, could still turn into risky decisions. But at least now it feels like there's a real plan in motion. And after a 3-14 season, that's something Raiders fans desperately needed to see. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think these moves actually put the Raiders on the right path? Or do you think the team still has a long way to go before they're competitive again? Drop your opinion in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like. This channel, Raiders Nation Update, is still brand new, and the goal right now is to reach our first 5,000 subscribers. So if you're a true Raiders fan who enjoys real and honest conversations about this team, no sugarcoating, just football talk between fans, make sure you subscribe and be part of the community we're building here. Thanks for watching, and as always, Raiders Nation for life.